Hard to tell if anybody has joined in or not. Oh, okay. Let's see. We already have a question from Faris. Will you make the hands-on Swift data with UI kit? There are no plans for UI kit or anything related to UI kit. I am just using Swift UI. It's just, much easier. So no, I am not doing anything with UI kit these days. All right. Okay, it's kind of hard for me to see who is joined. Okay, so if you have joined this, go ahead and write where you're joining from, like maybe which region. I know it's Saturday. I'm in US. It's Saturday over here, so you might be busy working with something else. But I like to do these workshops only on Saturdays because that's when I'm a little bit free. All right. And in this workshop, you can follow along actually if you want. So let me share this link. I've already shared it, but you can look at the link. That's a GitHub repository, and you can download the starter project. It's like this one, starter project, because this is where you'll be starting with. How to open Swift data database like core data with SQLite. So I'll probably show you during the workshop. I'll show you how you can actually open it. All right. All right. So make sure that you have the repository. So this link for the repository is right there in your YouTube chat. And if you go to the repository, download the starter project. Starter project means that this is our starting point of our project. All right. But I want to hear from other people who are joining. It's kind of hard for me to tell who has joined or not. I know that Faris, you have joined, so thank you for joining. But other people who has joined, go ahead and introduce yourself. Where are you logging in from? So go ahead and introduce yourself. All right, and I'm gonna check out some other channels over here. Okay, SwiftData Workshop. I need a link for the workshop. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, so this workshop will be doing a little bit of Swift data and how you can use Swift data. So I have already pasted the URL for the repository starter project. So we will be learning from the starter project. So make sure that you download the starter project, and let me see how it looks like. Okay, so this is what the starter project will actually look like. Okay. It's called Budget App Workshop, and it's a starter project. So this means that if I run this application right now, when I browse that link 404, this is not the web page you are trying to go for. Why is it giving you 404? Let me double check it. It's not a private repository. Is it a private repository? I accidentally made it private. No, it's a public repository. Let me try to visit this. Oh, not this one, sorry. I am in the wrong repository. This one. Oh, no, it is private. Okay, I need to make this public, and I forgot how to make it public. Let's see, where is it? Danger, change repository visibility, change it to public. Yes. Okay, sorry about that. Make this repository public. Okay, I have to use the authenticator and all that stuff. It's just a hassle with this, and the code always expires. Yeah, I'll give you the link to the repository. Let me see. Sorry about that. There we go. That should be public now. All right. And when you go to the repository, there we go. Make sure you download the starter project. And you can download the final project also, but open the starter project. And if you click on it, it will show you something like that. Then simply click on view raw. So this is going to download a zip file. All right. It's just easier to give you the zip file, and then you can extract the zip file and then open the project in Xcode. It's just easier to do that. All right. So once you have access to the starter project, so this is what the starter project kind of looks like. It does not really have any connection with SwiftData. If I run this application right now, the starter project in my browser, you will see that it's just going to display some user interface, like really basic, and also it's just going to display some dummy records, display list of all the budgets and all that stuff. Okay, everyone can see that. And is the font size okay, or do you want me to increase the font size? For my side, it looks okay, but let me know if the font size is going to be a problem. All right. Yeah, let me know if the font size is okay, if you can see the font and everything. Okay. All right. Okay, so the font size is okay. Yeah, so make sure that you start the actual application. Let me actually hold on a second. Oops, not over here. Yeah, try to download the application and let me see. Double check over here. I'm just checking out some stuff over here on the side. But yeah, make sure you have the link to the repository, so make sure that you download that part. And if you have other people who wants to join this live stream, yeah, go ahead and share the link with them. That's perfectly fine, all right? Okay. So you can see right now in the code, or when we run the application, it's just saying display a list of all the budgets. So it's all dummy data. It's like nothing going on. I can go ahead and click on add budget, and it shows me some blank screen. I mean, nothing really going on. So this whole project is not even integrated with SwiftData right now. So what we want to do is we want to integrate it with SwiftData. We want to create we want to create the budget models. We want to create relationships and all that stuff. So let's see how we can do that. So we're creating a budgets application, and budget application is going to maintain a budget, like how much we can spend, how much we have already spent, how much is remaining, and we will also be able to add expenses. So in SwiftData, if you want to create a model or represent something like an entity, you add it as a model. So I'm going to go ahead and add a model, and I will call it budget. Okay, and you can see that I've added it inside the models folder. Obviously, you can add it anywhere you want, but I'm just organizing it in a way that I'm adding it in the models folder. All right. Okay. All right. Any question at this point? Everyone is hopefully able to download the repository, which contains the starter project. If you have, just go ahead and tell me in the chat that you were able to download it. All right. Okay, so what I want to do now is to create the budget model. Like, what exactly do you want to store in the budget? So I'm going to go ahead and say class budget and the things that I want to store in the budget. All right. So what I want to store is the name of the budget and also a limit for the budget. A limit is kind of like saying that this is it, this is how much I'm going to spend on the budget. Like if I have a budget for groceries, I'm going to spend like $500. So that's the limit part of it. It's a class, so I need to provide initializers also. There we go. And I'll import SwiftData also. Now, currently, it's just a class. Nothing more, nothing less, just a Swift language class. But if I want to persist this or save it to Swift, to the SQLite database using SwiftData, I have to use the model macro. All right. And once you put a model macro on a budget class or any other class, then it gains some special features from SwiftData framework, and now you can actually persist it or save it into the database. Now you might be wondering, why class, why not a struct? And you might want to change it to struct. But if you change it to struct, and if I build my application now, you'll see that apart from the other things, it's actually saying that you cannot have the model macro on a struct. So it must be a class. So that's why we are creating it as a class. Because the model macro cannot be applied. So this model macro I guess I will add it like this, cannot be applied on a struct. It can only be applied on a class. All right, so that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind when you're working with SwiftData and we're creating these models, that they can only be applied to a class. And by the way, if you have any questions, you can ask in the YouTube chat. Hopefully everyone has access to the repository. Let me see if I can show it to you again. So here's the repository. It should be public. I'm going to add the link again in the chat. And what you want to do is you want to download the starter project and simply open the starter project, because starter project contains the starter code, like the UI stuff and all that. So you want to start, or you want to download the starter project. All right. Okay, back to our code. All right, so at this point we have the budget, which is a class, and it contains properties like name and limit. So these are the only two things we have. And we want to save the budget now, right? We want to persist the budget. Let's go back to our budget list screen. Now the first thing we see over here is that the budget list screen, if we look at the preview, there we go. Preview might take a little bit of time. So if you look at the preview, it's going to show us a list. But all of this data in the list is all dummy data, like hard-coded data that we have. So what we want to do is we want to add some dummy data, and so that we can display the dummy data in our Xcode previews. Now, I use Xcode previews all the time. Now, I know it's kind of slow right now because I haven't really ran it, but you can see that Xcode previews are nice because you can see what you're building immediately. So I don't have to run the application to see what's going on. I can just see what's going on. So one thing that you can do if you want to provide some dummy data for your application is create a context, a model container or a context that can provide you some dummy data. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new over here, new file, and I can call it preview container. Now, if you don't really want to type all this code that I'm doing, then you can always go to the repository that I have shared, and you can download the full or the final project. That will have all the code that you need. All right, so you don't have to follow along or type the code if you don't want to. Okay, so what I want to do now is provide some way or do something so that I can provide some dummy data to my list. Like you can see the list over here is not getting the data from SQLite database using SwiftData. It's just running a loop and getting the data. All right. So that's why I created preview container. And I can easily use preview container. So let me go ahead and show you. I'll import SwiftData and preview container. Preview container will give you the access to the model container, or preview container will be of type model container. And model container is the container that manages your SwiftData context. All right. So in this container, you will have the context that SwiftData can use to see which things have changed, which things have added, which things have removed, which entities or which models have removed. And we can create this container easily by saying model container and then passing some sort of a configuration. So we're creating a model container for the budget, which means that it will contain that particular entity. And for the configuration, we can simply pass in model configuration in stored in memory, true. So what is this stored in memory part? The stored in memory is over here saying that the model is not going to persist information into the actual database, but it is going to be storing it in memory only. Okay, so that's the important part because we're using it for the preview and there's no real need for us to save it to the disk or persist it to the actual database. And then we can return it. Now, if we use this particular approach, it will create our model container, but you will see that the model container doesn't really have any dummy data to begin with. And the other thing you can see over here is that it's telling you something about being non-isolated. We want the preview container to be on the main actor. So I'm just going to go ahead and decorate it with the main actor property wrapper over here. We also want our container to have some data in it, because if you don't have any data, then what's the point of the, what's the point of the container? I mean, it's going to always be empty. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and add a struct with a simple budgets property. And this is going to return us just 2 budgets. And keep in mind that all of the stuff that we are doing it for creating our previews when we're using SwiftData. Okay. So now what I can do is I can just go for budget in sample data.budgets, and we will have an array of budgets. So I can say container dot, let's go ahead and say, well, I guess we are already in that particular loop, so we can say main context dot insert budget. Let's go ahead and build it. Okay, so we have created the preview container, and the only reason we created the preview container is so that we can pass it to the preview. Now, let's see what happens if I go to the budget list screen, and right over here in the previews, I can actually pass the model container as the preview container. Make sure that we decorate it with main actor because we want all of this to run on the main actor. There we go. And what happened is that now the budget list screen, along with any other things in the navigation stack, they will have access to this preview container, and the data will be, we will be getting it from in-memory database for SwiftData. And now I can run the query. So if you want to fetch anything from SwiftData, you can use the query property wrapper or query macro, and then you can actually say budget. So, and I recommend that you use that. I mean, I know some people are like, we don't want to use query inside the view. You know, if you don't use query, you're gonna get into a lot of trouble because you will have to manage all of those things on your own. So Apple has done a lot of work behind core data fetch request and query macro so that it can detect changes and it can tell the view that, hey, the view you need to update. So a lot of work has gone into it, all right? And now I can replace it with budgets. Budgets. Now keep in mind that since we are passing the preview container, it will have a couple of our budgets. Remember the budgets that we added over here? 2 budgets, right? Groceries and vacation. Because we only want this for the previews. So it will have those 2 budgets. And now when I say budgets and I use it, I will be able to display it. So I will say over here budget in budget.name. So let's see what happens now. See that? Is that cool? Look at that over there. So this is coming from directly from SQLite database using our preview container. Now preview container, once again, is just for the previews. We are just using it so that we can work with the previews. All right. Any questions at this point? So I think it's very important that you create these preview containers. Let's see over here. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Okay, so this is cool that we're able to get the data. The next step would be to how do we make sure that we insert the data. All right, and by the way, if you do have any questions, you can always use the YouTube chat, and I can look at your question and I can answer your questions. All right. All right. So we are able to display the data coming from SwiftData or coming from SQLite using SwiftData. But what we want to do is also allow the user an opportunity so that they can add the data. Right now, if we press add data or add budget, it shows us this modal and it doesn't really have anything. But since you have downloaded the starter project, what we can do is there's already a view that we can use or a screen that we can use. It's called add budget screen. So what we want to do is simply replace right over here in the sheet, we just want to say add budget screen. Okay, and this is going to allow us to show the add budget screen so that we can display it. So now if I say add budget screen, you can see it shows add budget screen. Cool, right? Now add budget screen doesn't really add anything right now. I mean, if you type in something over here, it's not really going to do much. So there are a couple of different things we need to do in the add budget screen. Let's go to the add budget screen. Add budget screen is also part of your starter project, so you can definitely take a look at that. And in the add budget screen, what we want to do is we want to add a budget to SwiftData database. Over here also you can see I'm using the same exact syntax, but I want to also pass in the model container. So I'm going to say preview container so that we can use the SwiftData preview container we implemented earlier on. Again, the preview container is simply inserting it into SQLite database using SwiftData, but it is inserting it in memory database, not an actual database. If you want to insert it into an actual database, you definitely can. That's not a big deal. If you simply go to preview container, you can say is stored in memory to be false, and then it will start storing it in the actual database. But since we're working with previews, we want to store it in memory only. All right. Okay, so this is going pretty good. Let's go ahead and add some title to it. For some reason it's missing a title. I'll say new budget. Okay. The first thing I want to do is I want to perform some validation. All right. Now, if you're using Swift UI, usually what people do is they create these view models and add all of the validation code and all that code in there. But in Swift UI, the view itself is the view model. So if you have any kind of presentation logic or transformation logic, you can actually put it right inside the view. So I'll show you that how we can do that. All right. Let's see over here. Okay. The first thing what I want to do is I want to make sure that this save button is only enabled when you have entered something in the text boxes. So this property is form valid is the one that is making sure that the form and the entries are valid or not. So I'm going to change this, and I'm going to first get the data out. I'll say limit. I'm going to unwrap it. If it fails to unwrap, then I'm just going to return false. Okay. We also want to check if the name is correct or not. So if the name is not empty or white space and the limit is greater than 0, then only the form is valid. Meaning you cannot enter a budget that's just like a negative numbers, so that's not allowed. Now, one thing you will note is the save button is now disabled because is form valid is returning you is from valid is returning you true or false, and the disable becomes true. Okay. Let's go ahead and enter something in the budget name. I'm going to say entertainment. And now you can see that it is enabled. All right. So this is how you can do really basic validation in SwiftUI. Pretty simple, right? Now, if you want to write a test, you can write a test for is empty or white space. That is a property you can write a test for if you want. Right. Any other questions? Any questions from anyone? You can type your questions in the chat. All right. Okay. So now let's go ahead and see that how we can actually save the data in the database. All right. Let's see over here. Now the way that you save the data in using SwiftData or in the database is you get access to the model context. Since we have already used the model container, we can get access to the model context by saying environment, model context. So there we go, we get access to the model context, and this model context will have functions that you can use to insert a new model, a new object of type budget into the database. So I can go over here and I can do that. I can say context dot insert, but where's the model? Well, we didn't really create the model, so let's go ahead and create the model. This will be a budget model with a name and a limit. So again, over here you can actually add some sort of a limit. We already have the limit. I can unwrap it, I guess, right here. Limit. And then I can insert it. So that's the simplest code that you can write to insert something into your SwiftData or using SwiftData into SQLite. That's the simplest one. Right after the insert, since the new budget is showed in a modal, let's dismiss the modal. Okay. Now let's go to budget list screen. Let's try to add a new budget. New budget, what should we add a budget? Let's say entertainment. $250. And as soon as I press save, see that? Entertainment is added to our budget list. It's pretty simple, right? I mean, we were able to do all of this stuff. We didn't really have to write view models. We didn't have to create all these separate layers that we talk about. When you're working with these modern frameworks like React and Flutter and SwiftUI, make sure that you use the power of these frameworks. If you don't use the frameworks as they are designed to be used, then you will always be fighting with the framework. So don't fight with the framework. Just try to use, in core data, you use fetch request. In what's that called, the Swift data, you use queries. Try to use these things. These things are important. All right. Any questions at this point? Again, you can type the question in your chat. Now, sometimes, and this is the last thing I'm going to cover, sometimes you need to know that what's going on behind the scene, right? Like what queries are getting invoked when you're selecting where is your database file and all that stuff. In order to do that, what you need to do is search for core data debugging. And there are a lot of articles, so I'm going to click on the first one over here by useyourloaf.com. And in order to debug core data, I know that we're talking about Swift data, but you can also do Swift data uses uses core data behind the scene, so we can use the same launch arguments and same environment variables in Swift data also. So over here you can see the two different launch arguments. So I'm just going to copy the first one. And let's go and click and edit the scheme. In the arguments, I'm going to add that. And that's it. So now when you run your application in the simulator, it will show you what's going on. But before we do that, go back to the app file. And over here, you can see that we're missing the model container part of it, right? So I'm going to say model container for budget.self. Now, I'm not going to say preview container over here. Remember preview container? We used it over here. This preview container is just for the previews. This is the actual app. I mean, this is the actual app that when you run it on the simulator, when you run it on the device, this code is going to get executed. So that's why I want to use the real database over here, not the preview container, not the in-memory database. So that's why I'm saying model container for budget.self, because budget is the only model that we have. So now if I run this application, making sure that we have added those our launch arguments, you will see a lot of stuff going on in your output window. See that? And one of those things that you can see is the path to the database. Right there is the path to the database, which might be interesting to you. Now, you have the path to the database, and what can you do? How can you open the database? Well, let's go ahead and select the path to the database. There we go. I'm not going to select default.store, just going to go till application support. Let's go ahead and open up a terminal. All you need to do is to simply go to that particular path. So cd, so now I'm at that path. And if I do ls, I can see the file, which in this case is default.store. I can say SQLite 3 default.store. And now I'm using SQLite command prompt, all right, or CLI. So now I can say schema, and it prints out all the schema for all the different tables. Now, it will contain some tables that you didn't really talk about, right? So we will have the table over here, budget and all that stuff. So we can do that, all right? And I think we have to say exit to exit it out. So this is how you can see the schema part of it, all right? So we have a question and it's saying, what if budget list screen needs to access more than one model? Okay, well, it depends like what kind of model that you want to access. But yes, let's say that for some reason, budget list screen also wants to get more models, like query private var users. And you will just do a user like that. Now, when you do things like that, you have to make sure that in the preview container, let's go to the preview container because we are doing it for the preview, right? We are only saying over here budget.self. We're not saying user. So I would also have to say over here user.self. All right. And that's it. That's how you can access multiple models in the budget list screen. Now, of course, I don't really have user.self, but if you did, you will do it like that. So hopefully that answers your question. But I would definitely advise you to use query and don't try to wrap these things with view models and all that stuff. You're going to be in a lot of trouble if you start wrapping your Swift UI, which is already in architecture, with another pattern on top of it. And people start doing that. I've seen it. A lot of people are doing that, and they are getting into a lot of problems. All right. So don't do that. Keep it simple and try to just use the things that Apple has provided it to you. That's the main thing. If you deviate it from what Apple has provided to you, then yeah, it's going to get difficult. Okay, let me run the application again because I want to show you that we selected or we enabled that core data debugging features, and you can see, let me delete this stuff. It's always a good idea to enable those things because now we can see what's going on. So I'm going to add a budget. It's going to say entertainment, and keep your eyes in the terminal window so that you can see that what SQL commands are going to get executed. There we go. Look at that. Okay, let's check it out. There's a lot of stuff going on over here, right? See that? There are some commands that you might be interested in. This one, right there. Insert into Z budget. Z budget, why Z? Well, that's just how core data creates the table. All right. Keep in mind that behind the scene, SwiftData is using core data. So insert into Z budget, primary key, some sort of a ENT key, OPT, limit, zname, something, something. But we can definitely see that there is a insert SQL command, like an actual TSQL command getting executed. All right. So that is an important part in debugging. This can definitely help you that, oh, all of this was actually getting executed. All right. So definitely you can use those. And I think right over here you can see this article. I'm going to link this article. That will help you. There we go. Okay. Now, if you have some logic in your code that you want to get executed, right? Let's say that what happens if I try to add another budget. So I already have groceries and vacation, but I'm going to add another budget and I'll call it vacation. Oops. Now keep in mind that I already have vacation. Now I have two vacations. I don't want that. Right? So what can I do in those cases? There are some attributes that you can put or some property wrappers or macros that you can use to prevent that from happening. There is a unique attribute that you can use. I think it's called over here unique. Not attribute, sorry, the what is that called? The property macro. It unfortunately doesn't really work as expected. So let's not use that. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I am saving a budget, the names are unique. And if they are not unique, then I should probably throw an exception. So this is a business logic, basically, a domain logic. There's a rule that you need to follow that if the budget name is not unique, then you should throw an exception. So that's a business logic. So where should we put that business logic? And you can actually put that business logic right in your model. So I'm going to go ahead and create a save function. Now, keep in mind that this is not true for every single saving operation for every single thing that you will create, but this is one of the ways that you can do that, because now you do have certain logic that you need to test out. And that certain logic is that in order to save a budget, it must have a unique name. All right. So one way to do that is creating a save function right inside your model, the budget model, and this can be a throwable function. Okay. And over here in the save function, now you can actually check that if there is already a budget with the same name or not. And how do we check that? Well, there are many different ways of checking, but one of the ways that you can do is you can create a fetch descriptor. And fetch descriptor can take in a predicate. So I'm just going to say over here the fetch descriptor basically is a description of what we want to fetch. A predicate is the condition that's going to help us find what we're looking for. So where the name of the budget is equals to the name that you have provided. Now keep in mind that this may not work for case insensitive. From the top of my head, I can't really remember, but this is definitely not going to work for case insensitive search. But there is a something you can do in SwiftData where it will work with case insensitive. But I'm going to leave that for now and keep it simple like this. Okay. So basically what we're doing over here is that we're creating this fetch descriptor, and we're saying that the predicate, meaning the filter, we are saying that if the name is equals to the name property, which is already stored in the database, this is the database portion of it. If it is equal to the name of the budget that you're trying to save, so that's our fetch descriptor. Now let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say I'm going to fetch all of these budgets. If I want to execute this fetch descriptor, I can actually do that. Context.fetch and fetch descriptor. Now I'm hoping that this will be empty, but if it is not empty, if budgets is not empty, well, then there's a problem. Throw an exception. If it is empty, then go ahead and insert the model, which is, well, we are inside the model. We are the model, so it will be self. And we can throw this exception. So whatever the budget error you want to throw, you can actually throw this error. So I'm just going to put the error over here. It will be like a really simple kind of an error. Oh, maybe we already have the error, so I don't have to declare it again. I can just throw the error over here. Throw, THRO, throw budget error.duplicate name. Okay. And now whenever we are trying to save the budget, we can use the save function. So I can go back to my add budget screen, and over here you can see that I'm using it like this. But now I can go ahead and probably say something like budget.save with the context. So we can provide the context, catch the exception. If you have the exception, set the error message to whatever the localized description is, and dismiss it. So this is another way of doing things where, where it should throw an exception when you are using, when you are saving the same budget name. Let's try to run this and see. So I have groceries and vacation. I'm going to go and add another budget. I'm going to call it vacation. Limit is whatever. And there we go. Budget name must be unique. So this is how you can actually test it out. Or you can run some business logic and business rules in SwiftData. All right. Now there is a unique attribute, also a unique macro that you can use, but the unique macro doesn't throw an exception if it finds something not unique. It simply performs upsert. So instead of vacation to be $200, it will upsert or update it to be $300, the new one. But this one, you can see that it's telling us that there's something wrong. Now I can say vacation 2, and that is perfectly fine because now the names are unique. All right. So any other questions? So that is going to be kind of like our basics of SwiftData. You can download the complete project right over here, and I'll add the link. Now this is just a very small part of the workshop. I do this workshop. These workshops are usually like 3 hour long, but this is kind of like just a preview of the workshop. And depending on the workshop, you can always go to my website, azamsharp.school, and register for the upcoming workshops. And all these workshops are very hands-on, as you can see. I mean, it's all code. You can ask questions. This workshop, so the new workshop that are coming up is Introduction to Testing in iOS. So that's a workshop I'm going to be hosting on October 12th. And the other workshop is coming up on October 26th, which will be Introduction to Supabase for iOS developers. So these are the couple of workshops that are coming up. But hopefully you have enjoyed this kind of like a preview or a trailer of the workshop. And if you are looking for a more detailed, like a 3 hour workshop, then you should check out my website. And I also have some courses that you can check out on my website. These are also very, detailed courses. All right. Any other questions that I can answer? All right. Well, that is pretty much it. I thank you for joining me. Hopefully you have learned a little bit about SwiftData. Obviously, SwiftData, there are relationships, there are migrations, there is CloudKit integration, and a lot of other stuff. So we'll do the complete workshop again in the future. But hopefully this preview of the workshop gave you a little bit of idea of how I run my workshops, and hopefully you have enjoyed it and attend some future workshops. All right. So thank you so much everyone for coming, and I will see you next time.